that's the beginning and end of my PowerPoint presentation. So remembering 35 years ago when I was sitting in a room like this, I thought I'd maybe tell you what I was thinking about today that might be relevant to what you're trying to do.
他说呢，其实35年前他跟大家讲他的他也讲过反正。
So I got into the patent space largely by mistake. My training was in finance, math, and economics, and came to it a little bit later in life. I agree with Professor Shim that being an inventor is extremely difficult and an extremely difficult way to make your money if that's how you choose to do it.
那他其实是念经济的，那么他很同意大家要做讲的，是念科学跟做工程要赚钱是很正常的。
But many of you will go to work for large companies potentially, and they have the capital and will make the investment. Trillions of dollars are spent on R&D, and billions are spent in the patent space.
但是各位呢会进入大公司去工作，那么公司有很多的资源来申请专利，花很多的钱来做研发。
So the key is you can't make money in the space. You just have to figure out where you fit into the space.
但是你还是找得到你的财源、你的未来，但是你只要想想到底要怎么样做才能赚钱。
So further by way of background, how I got into the space was I was working for a company that got sued for patent infringement, and even though I wasn't a lawyer, they asked me to help handle the case.
好，他还没有当律师之前，他的公司被告，那就是为什么他开始进入这个。
And I was just fascinated by what I learned. Basically, it took me 3 years to learn what Professor Shim described in a few minutes, and I decided that somehow or another I was going to try to work my way through that problem and see if there wasn't a way that I could make money doing it. So I left big companies and went off by myself.
后来他刚刚沈教授讲他9分钟的事情，他很痛苦的在那个公司处理这件事过了3年，然后接下来他自己创业，准备用这样的方式来赚钱。
And so I realized what inventors lacked was capital. And so I applied capital and a little bit of intellect to the situation and tried to help them make money.
他说呢，其实创新方面人最缺的就是钱，所以他就汇集很多资金，准备来做帮大家发明的赚钱。
There were many successes and failures along the way. The press tends to pick up on the successes, but it was a difficult path, but ultimately proved to be successful.
那这当中经历很多历程，他是我们这个行业的前锋，但是现在目前非常成功。
So after we got done with the what we call licensing, which is where we offer a patent to someone for a royalty.
他说呢，授权是一种方式，取得你的权益金。
I decided that the next thing I wanted to do was to figure out how to invalidate them, which was something that Professor Shim talked about.
那如果你不想付权利金，就像刚刚沈教授讲的，我们要把它无效掉。
So I spent 3 years on that with one of my colleagues. In particular, we focused in heavily on pharmaceutical patents.
所以他很认真的在刚刚那个案件里面的医药专利里面想办法把对方的专利无效掉，花了3年时间。
And after sort of spending that time, since about 13 years worth of work, I took a little bit of time off and discovered blockchain.
那在这30年当中，他思考了一个方式，然后开始做比特币区块链。
So what really happened is that a friend of mine in Shanghai asked me to invest in Bitcoin in 2014, and I had no idea what Bitcoin was.
2014年他不知道比特币是什么的时候，上海就有教他看真的投资的机遇。
I gave him a little bit of money and then ran into him again in mid 2016 and found that he had increased my money about 10 times.
他说呢，就2014、2016那笔钱赚了10倍。
I went back and started to read more about Bitcoin and realized that I never understand it. To this day, I'm fascinated by it, but don't profess to understand it.
所以他在这当中发现，哇，比特币区块链实在是一个太神奇、太重要、太有未来的一个。
But what I didn't study more of was the underlying technology, blockchain, and started to think that this might be a relatively important innovation that could change many markets.
那其实他研究的是区块链里面的技术，可以应用在很多的领域，会改变未来很多的市场。
So for most of you, your timing is perfect on the blockchain side. It's the right age where you'll see it start to exponentially and arithmetically increase over time in its utilization in a number of industries.
所以各位的年纪实在是太丰富这个社会了，所以你的财富、你的智慧、你的运动都可以急速的一个增加。
And I remember when I was in school and I would see something new, I always thought that by definition that would be too late. I don't think you're going to be too late on this one.
其实对我们来讲，我们都太晚进入这个领域，但是对年轻的各位来讲，真是恭逢其时。
So worked on the infringement part that I talked to you about, where we made money. Worked on the invalidity part where we talked about it, and now I've transitioned to trying to figure out how to make money with the new technology.
那刚刚讲过了那些侵权啊、授权啊，或者是一些怎么运营的方式，现在要告诉你怎么用新技术来创新发明赚钱。
So if you think about it, you could be an inventor, or what you can do is you can have some other invention and figure out how to better utilize it.
他说你可以有发明，或者是别人发明怎么样做应用。
So take a situation that Professor Shin pointed out. So there's trillions of dollars spent on R&D. As you work your way down that funnel, there's billions of dollars spent on patent. Think of the money that just Taiwan spends on promoting innovation.
他说呢，怎么样去把你的创新发明做最大的运用，其实很重要，比前面花那么多钱做研发还重要。
And one embodiment of all that expenditure takes the form of patents.
那我们做很多的 paper， 其实都只是一个实施力而已。
And what other asset class would you invest in where 2 out of 100, which I think is maybe a best 3 out of 100, turn out to be valuable?
那其实100个专利大概只有3个有用。
And an even more disturbing statistic is that only 5 out of 100 ever turn out to be a commercial product or service.
那大概只有5个曾经被拿来做成商品或者是服务。
So one of the things that we started to work on very recently was could we help to fix that and improve the return on investment in patents?
那他们现在做的工作就是怎么样投资报酬率让它提升。
So I work, because my background is primarily in finance, so I started to think about it as an asset class and how we can improve it, and went out and talked to a bunch of people who created new asset classes.
所以他现在就对这些技术的分类跟分级做了研究。
And started to, as we looked at the patent space, we realized, as Professor Shin pointed out, there's many things that to be polite are less than efficient and frankly fundamentally flawed about the patent system.
他说呢，现在的专利系统呢，其实是不太有效率的。
So one of the first things is that even people in the patent space find this hard to believe. It's difficult to figure out who owns a patent.
而且现在你很难知道到底专利已经转让到谁手上。
Assuming you could get over that, it's even more difficult after you figure out who owns it to figure out what it covers. It's a 70-page dense legal document with drawings and very complex words that are difficult to understand.
还有就算你把专利认真读懂，它到底内涵有多少，含金量多少，包含了哪些技术范围，应用在哪里，你也搞不太清楚。
Assuming you get past those 2 hurdles, then you have to figure out what Professor Shin called validity. So is the patent credible under the law?
那现在就说你的专利就算是取得，但是你到底应用在哪些商品，这也是一个问题。判定。
Then if you went another problem, you go and you ask 10 different people or 100 different people, what is the patent worth? You'll get 100 different answers.
然后你如果问专利的价值有多少，你问100个人，有100个估价。
So it's an asset class that by its very nature has a number of difficulties that it faces.
所以有不同的计算方法，不同的评估方法。
And so what you do is that, again, we didn't invent anything. We're trying to figure out how to make that asset class more productive for both the inventor companies and society.
所以他们现在做的是怎么样让这些专利的交易更有系统、更有效率、更有证据基础。
So as you're going through and thinking about what you might want to do in the patent space, don't get too narrowly focused on being an inventor. That's one great job.
他说呢，所以现在如果你进入这个领域，就不要花太多时间在做发明、做研究，你想想其他的方式。
But think about the opportunity you have to make it just in general, the asset class more productive.
他说怎么样让专利的分级更有效率。
So that's the high level. Now, as you go back in and try to figure out how to make money, which is apparently what you folks wanted to hear about today.
他说大家今天来听怎么样赚钱，对不对？
I would agree with Professor Shin that it is there are probably better ways to make money.
他说呢，这是的确做这一行是很好赚钱的。
But I don't think there are many areas that are more fun and more interesting ways to make money.
但是他觉得这要花很多钱，而且也不是那么有趣的一件事情。
So one of the things that we want to do is that wind the expense, narrow the expense gap down so that it's easy for inventors to file easier inventors to make that additional investment, whether they do that through crowdsourcing or fundamentally making intermediary transactions less expensive.
就要用人工智慧的方法，然后帮你把前案做分析，然后告诉你哪里有蓝牌，哪些地方它有怎么样去做回避设计，然后把专利写得更好。
That's fundamentally one of the magics of blockchain. So I think that blockchain is going to be important on the security side, of course. But blockchain is also going to impact any industry where you see high intermediary costs.
他说，所以其实区块链不是只有用来做这个虚拟金融，包括他刚刚说的这个媒体的这个传输，或者其他需要安全，或者需要技术，或者是需要资讯安全的领域都用得到。
So the reason that you're seeing so many ICOs and other transactions and finances like that launch is that the applicability of blockchain across multiple industries is becoming apparent.
所以呢，无可避免的就是几乎每个领域都会用到区块链的这个技术。
My personal view is that most of the ideas are not particularly strong, but it's very common in new technology areas to see people jump into the space before they've completely thought through what it is they're doing.
所以在这个加密解密的技术里面运用到的，包括资讯安全，包括传输相关的这个应用，通通会在这个经济体系里面呈现。
So the second, and then what really makes it interesting, and this is where you also have an opportunity as well in the nature of your university, is to bring in and combine other technologies like artificial intelligence, which is another one that's been promised for 20 years, 30 years, and is finally beginning to start to deliver.
所以人工智慧在这个领域运用的非常多，然后让很多的这个运算、计算的运用都更快更精。
So if you look at blockchain on a fundamental level, it's essentially a data. It happens to be a very good one, but it's essentially a database.
所以其实这些加密解密其实都这些技术就是资料库的一个技术。
Opportunity that I see is combining blockchain technology and artificial intelligence.
所以他认为这个加密解密的区块链技术跟人工智慧结合在一起会有更大的应用。
But in your studies, there's numerous other examples of opportunities where you might combine blockchain with whatever it is you're interested in, or you might combine AI with whatever it is you're interested in, and that's the technology opportunity that faces you today.
所以你现在应该想是这些你可以应用在哪里？天马行空的想更多的应用，做更多的一个申请。
So again, inventing is great, but I think you have the opportunity to make money and to make a difference just applying these different technologies in new ways.
所以发明是很重要的，但是怎么样应用在技术，然后在很多的应用上面，然后产生更多的服务跟产品，这个才是你可以赚更多钱的地方。
So I'd be happy to answer any questions or tell any more stories that you want to hear, but that's it. Thank you.
他说他讲到这里，希望大家提问题，问一下他人生的经验，然后他再继续分享。
When I was an engineer, you are busy doing experiment, learning things, but what can you recommend them to do to prepare to become an entrepreneur or step into another area of the universe or things like that?
My main advice would be to get started. Look, I've talked on this before, and I always, maybe because just the way I grew up, but I always thought that you had to be like Satoshi and invent something huge in order to be successful, and that's simply not true. That most innovation is very incremental, so that if you can, and examples that abound in your life, Facebook wasn't the first, MySpace was well before them, Classmates was before them. If you look at Uber, it's simply an improvement on the taxi ride. So I think that the most important thing that, of the hundreds of inventors that I've talked to, is that the innovation that you capture doesn't have to be something fundamentally new. Another example is fences, right? So if there was only one patent just on fences, the Sumerians 10,000 years ago would have done it.
他说的就是说，其实创新发明到创业有很遥远的路，但是它有时候也不是那么难。比如说，我们来看一看，刚刚我们讲的那个中文就是发明那个比特 特币。当然，那是一个非常基础又非常重要的一个创建。但是如果你说 Uber 只是改变现在实体上面的一个计程车的一个交易，结合了地图跟网络，那它也是一个很大的商业模式的改变。所以发明创新跟创业当中，其实是你怎么样去汇合、整合跟应用。它未必要是很难的发明创意，它也未必很简单的创意不会赚钱。它很多的创新创意也未必一定要变专利。
So the Edisons of the world are the people that we read about when we're in school, but the truth is that you can make a significant contribution by making an incremental improvement.
但他说的去实践才是一件最重要的事情。你说爱迪生这么多的发明，如果都没有实践是没有用的。
And I think that that's the key to making money. So if I had known younger, I would have been looking for more incremental innovation as opposed to trying to invent the fence for the first time.
他说呢，如果他再年轻一点，他一定会想一个东西，然后好好的把它卖很多东西，卖出去赚钱，这个比较不是。
So I'm thinking about risky about such as cryptocurrency such as Bitcoin, right? If someone, the people wrote a code and they rewrite a code, what happened? Rewrite all the code and maybe all the money will disappear, right?
Right.
Is that risky happen? Will it happen?
Yeah. So my personal view on currencies. So I'm not sure it's been translated into Mandarin yet, but there's a book out by Neil Packard, that's his name, and it's called Digital Gold, and I highly recommend you read it. It puts this all in context, not in a scientific way, but gives you a really good perspective on what's going on in the space. There's a reason that these currencies are more popular in South America, where the economies have experienced hyperinflation and other significant problems that we haven't seen in France and the U.S. But what you're seeing is that notwithstanding the efforts of large financial institutions to downplay the importance of Bitcoin and blockchain, they're extremely nervous about it.
刚刚我们的那个吴教授说，那如果有人重写了你的那个比特币的这个码，那是不是你的比特币会消失？那当然，我们刚刚这个教授说，其实当然这个危险大家都会很担心。那至于这个怎么样去做这个比特币的这个运用，那当然现在很多个国家也都有做很多的一个法规的限制。那
that happened in the it's a coin, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Those the 60 million right? And they wrote a code.
Yeah. So look, there's a few fundamental problems though, and just let me put this a little bit in context.
他说呢，其实刚刚教授说，那比特币前一阵子也被骇客，那这些该怎么办？
The debit card that you use today has existed for 15 years.
我们现在的这个信用卡也已经用了50年了。
It took a while for that to become popular, and today, to me, mainstream. I don't know. I mean, anybody who wants a debit card, you got cash, you can go get one. But it took 15 years for that to adopt into the economy.
所以他认为说，如果我们使用信用卡的经验来回想比特币可能的未来的话，那觉得它应该就是花一点时间让它变成一个系统，然后在治安上面要做一些的。
But because they have third party, that's why. They're secure because they're third party. But in this technology, why we try to decentralize? I think that's the most dangerous part.
I do. And so here's what I think needs to happen. Is that in its current implementation, it has some limitations. So if I was going to go out and I had the motivation to work on blockchain and currency technology, I'd figure out how to close the boxes down quicker than 10 minutes. I would figure out, and I think that that's coming. I mean, I speak to many people and they're dedicating resources to that, but some smart person's going to come up with that. And I think you need to make it a little easier. Right now, it's still relatively difficult to transact. And then from putting on my economist hat, it's never going to get adopted until you see the volatility here now. So no one's going to use, few people are going to use Bitcoin as a currency that has 30% volatility across a given week. So one of the things that people are focused in on is, they thought that maybe futures that just came into the market would slow it down. It hasn't had any impact on it, but the volumes aren't there yet. So you're going to see talk of something called stablecoin. If they perfect the stablecoin model, which is simply a cryptocurrency that doesn't have the volatility associated with it, that is something that people will look at extremely seriously as a real store of value as opposed to a speculative transaction. And that's when I think you'll see the big difference in the economy. And that's when I think the banks will get really nervous because it has the opportunity to just make them completely irrelevant.
那当然，目前比特币的治安，另外就是比特币的这个价格浮动非常的大。但是呢，他认为说呢，在未来还是在经济体系里面会占一个重要的位置，那么银行也会非常担心。那刚刚教授说呢，其实他觉得比特币去中间化，因为以前我们说信用卡很安全，是因为我们有金资中心第三方在做这个安全保证。但是呢，现在去中心化以后，但是比特币其实是每一个 account 的人都可以做，因为多重进账的方式来做一个安全的一个规则。但是当然，技术上会有更高、更技术更先进的办法去做骇客。那么这个部分就是会其实也挺高。
So when you see big executives in the U.S. banks saying that Bitcoin is a scam.
他说呢，这个在美国认为比特币其实是诈骗方式骗。
The follow-up question they haven't been asked, or I haven't seen asked this, is then why are you spending millions of dollars on R&D and filing hundreds of blockchain patents?
然后说，所以那还是很多人在申请用的这个专利，因为其实这个专利它这个解码就不是只有应用在金融，它可以应用在很多相关的技术。
And even funnier thing is when I talk to CTOs of these large banks,
他说呢，他也跟着那个很大银行的那个技术长谈过这个问题。
and essentially they ask me how to make blockchain private.
他说呢，现在要怎么样比特币私有化，就是区块链私有化。
And I look at it curious, look at my face and say, isn't that what he's trying to do away with?
说难道不是每年都想这样做吗？因为我发现苏联、印度很多国家都开始要发行自己，包括中国都要发行自己的虚拟货币，自己的区块链货币。
So there's a role for the intermediary, it's just at a much lower margin.
那但是一旦这样子做以后，这个利率就会往下。
And when you see that happen, you're going to see broad scale adoption.
那你就会发现整个产业风险